Just how bad is corruption in the Gauteng government? We ask veteran Democratic Alliance politician Mr. Jack Bloom. Welcome, Jack.
Oh, good to be with you.
How long have you served in the Gauteng government?
Well, I'm the only member who was elected in 1994, and those were heady days indeed. There were high expectations. Mandela was our first president, and we actually had a government of provincial unity. It wasn't just a government of national unity. We had a national party or new national party members of the Gauteng provincial government. Of course, there were only 5 of us in the Democratic Party as it was then, but we all had high hopes, and Tokyo Sakwali was the first premier. People like Jesse Duarte were elected to the Gauteng legislature. I even recall Robert McBride, and of course we had Paul Mashatile and Nomvula Mokanyani. So I think it started off well, but I have to say it's been a very mixed picture since then.
So when did you first started to notice corruption setting in?
Well, there were the scandals that started. I recall Jessie Duarte was the MEC for safety and security, and she took a trip overseas to Portugal, allegedly with her boyfriend. That was the one story. But we also tipped off that there had been a car accident and that she had been driving without a driver's license. So we asked questions in the legislature about that, and it became quite a scandal. And of course, she resigned after that. But it doesn't seem to have affected her subsequent career in the ANC. There's just no sense of shame, to be honest. So we had that type of scandal. But we also started to hear that there were funds going missing in the housing department. I'm talking about the first term of office, the first 5 years. And then I have to say that it just got progressively worse. And, I could give you lots of examples, but that's how it started. And I think basically every department became affected. Not to become too cynical, but there's a very famous quote by Motlanthe, Kgalema Motlanthe, and he said words to the effect, he said this in 2007, he said, "There's not a single project that is undertaken without some people making benefit out of it." Now, I mean, he said that as Secretary General of the ANC in 2007, and it's always stuck with me. Not a single project embarked on without, somebody getting benefit out of it. So, were they there to benefit the province, or were they there to benefit themselves? That, to me, has been the question all along.
What are the worst cases that you can recall?
Well, I'm most familiar with the Gauteng Health Department, and it's been one tragic story after another. And must understand, I mean, millions of people are dependent for their health services on the Gauteng Health Department. So let's go to the period of office of Brian Hlongwa. That was from about 2006 to 2009. And that's when I think the wheels came off in that department. It's always been typically the largest budget item or the second largest budget item. So there's a lot of money there. And Brian Hlongwa also came in with high expectations. He spoke well. And to be honest, I started getting whistleblowers, people telling me things, and they said, "No, there's a company called 3P Consulting. You must watch them. What's happening there?" Now, they had a chief financial officer who I thought was quite competent, but he got rid of her. And then for a period of more than 2 years, I think, we had an acting chief financial officer who was seconded by this private company called 3P Consulting. Can you just imagine a private company that did business with the department, and they were handing out contracts themselves? I mean, I've seen this pattern in other departments. They have what they call a project management unit, and they give a contract to the so-called project management unit, and they start dishing out contracts to themselves. I mean, it's completely irregular, and all the comrades and buddies benefit from it. I mean, we saw that in the old public transport, roads and works department with the the so-called Alex Mafia. That was the stories that floated around there. But here was Branch Longwa, and all sorts of things were happening there, and got too bad even for the ANC. So well, for ANC terms, he was demoted to chief whip after the elections, 2009. And but he wasn't, he was still in an important position, but he was no longer the MEC for health. But look, there was a 1.2 billion rand fishy tender for a health information system. Branch Longwa promised us a health smart card. I mean, it all sounded wonderful, but that was just the tip of the iceberg of what was going on there. There was an audit company that went into various things. I remember there was a scam with it was only about, it was something like 50 million rand, smaller scale corruption in the broader scheme of things, but still, 50 million rand is enormous. I mean, imagine what you could do with that. It was for ultraviolet lights in hospitals to prevent infections. Now, the hospitals hadn't even asked for it, and they were useless. They didn't work. So basically, you spent 50 million rand on nothing. So that was the one scandal. As I said, the smart card scandal, the health information system scandal, that went to a very fishy company called Bioki Consortium, 1.2 billion rand. And I mean, the frustration is that, this was all a scandal hanging over his head, but Branch Longwa went on to have another 10 years as chief whip of the ANC. It was only when a SIU report was forced out of the government by a Promotion of Access Information Act that, became too bad even for the ANC, and he had to step down as chief whip. One of the scandals, which was also I had a tip off, that he'd bought a house for over 7 million rand in Bryanston, and that had been, by one of these people who had a contract with the department. So here he was buying 7.3 million rand, all above his obvious means. And to this day, he has appeared in court, December 2021. Then it was remanded, and he's supposed to go back to court again. I don't want to come too cynical, but I've come to the conclusion that with corruption, you've got to if you want to get away with corruption, you've got to be big and complex and just make it as complicated as possible so that it never gets to trial. They just go endlessly investigating, because that's what's actually happened. But I think in the case of Branch Longwa, it's very clear that he had political protection, because, endless investigations, and they added more to it. As I said, if you're going to do corruption, don't do something simple that you'll get caught out for, and prosecuted, and actually go to jail. Go big. And that's basically how long now it's been since, it's like going on for 13 years that Branch Longwa is still free, and they're trying to extradite one of his alleged accomplices, the MD of 3P Consulting, and he's in Britain at the moment. So we'll all have to wait till he gets expedited. So that's what's so frustrating. But Gauteng Mahlangu was called in by the ANC supposedly to clean up the mess left by Branch Longwa. By the way, I got censured in the House because they had an investigation by our Integrity Commissioner in the Gauteng legislature, and he said I'd made wrongful accusations against Branch Longwa, and that I had to apologize. So I stood up and said I refused to apologize for doing my job. So I got suspended. The only victim, call it that, was actually me. I got suspended for a week, and I wasn't allowed to go to the legislature. So finally he has appeared in court, so I do feel vindicated, but I think there's only going to be real justice when, he and his accomplices go to jail for what really happened. But that was followed by Gauteng Mahlangu, who's now notorious, but, she came in also as a Madam Fix-It, and, she's quite a strong personality. And then I suppose, there's another category. It's not just money that gets stolen. There's, I think, something, moral corruption, because Gauteng Mahlangu is actually most associated with the Sedimeni tragedy. If I think about that, how predictable it was, how many people warned her that if you're going to transfer more than 1,000 mental health patients to these fishy NGOs that turned out they were not licensed at all, and they were completely incapable of looking after mental health patients. And I raised it several times in the Gauteng legislature, and she was warned in the legislature. There were court cases that said this is going to be an absolute tragedy. Lives are going to be lost. Well, nevertheless, for whatever reason, she pushed along with it, and she claimed that, you know, they were saving money, and they had to cancel the contract with Life Sedimeni. And well, you know, the tragedy of it, I actually think she would have got away with it because she was protected right to the very end by Premier David Makura. I had heard rumours that there were actually deaths. So at the first opportunity, I asked a question for oral reply to Kudani Mshlangu. I said, you know, have there been any deaths? And she gave a very sort of, I remember the way she responded. She took a long time to get to the point, and then she said, "Oh, there have been 36 deaths." And I just thought, you know, this is unbelievable. And at first, there wasn't much of a reaction to that, to be honest. You know, I called attention to it in a press statement. I said, you know, 36 people have died. And anyway, subsequently, the health ombudsman was called in, and the national health minister got involved. But I just couldn't conceive that Premier David Makura shouldn't have dismissed Kudani Mshlangu there and then. You know, 36 people had died. And of course, the final tally was 144, and they were still dying during the period when Kudani Mshlangu wasn't suspended, still the MEC for Health, and she only was forced to step down or resigned when the health ombudsman's report came out 4 months later. So for a whole 4 months, you know, she was still in charge of that department. So to me, that's just actually, again, shameless moral corruption. I mean, in any other country, she would have resigned in disgrace. She wouldn't have hung on. And the fact that even afterwards, her and Brian Flopper, that was actually the big scandal, were re-elected to the ANC's provincial executive. So where's the shame? You know, you could be involved in corrupt activities in the health department where money is needed to save lives. You could be involved with the Life Sedimeni tragedy where vulnerable people die because of, your negligence, and you still get elected to the Gauteng Provincial Executive Committee. That's actually, shows you what the moral lack of moral caliber that we have in the Gauteng ANC. And it was only after an outcry that they were forced to step down. So, you know, those were some of the scandals. But the more I think about the warning signs were also in the early days with the credit card spending. You know, all MECs used to have this discretionary spending with a credit card. Famously, Paul Mashatile spent more than 90,000 rands one dinner. But we found other big spenders. Navula Mokoyane was a big spender. And we had a fellow called Humphrey Mamezi, who was involved in all sorts of things. And he purchased, to this day, I still don't know what it was all about. But, we had all sorts of whistleblowers telling us things. And somebody said to me, you know, he bought a painting for 10,000 rand from McDonald's. I said, I don't understand this. Who buys, anyway, a painting for 10,000 rand for his department? And apparently he had this painting in his office. And how do you buy a painting from McDonald's? So it turned out to be true. So, of course, in the scandal, and of course they protected him to the end, but finally Humphrey Mamezi was dismissed. But again, no shame. Humphrey Mamezi is now a member of Parliament today. So he was re-elected. You would think that his career would be over, but forget it. He was involved in all sorts of other things, and there he is, a member of Parliament. So, I don't, as I said, I don't want to be too cynical, but I don't give the benefit of the doubt anymore because, you know, if you think there's a hint of self-serving or corruption or doing things not for the right reason, it tends to be correct, unfortunately. I've come across too many very sad examples.
How many of the top 7 have come through Gauteng?
Well, that's what's interesting. There was Gwen Ramaphosa, who was twice an MEC for Health and didn't manage to do anything memorable. I mean, I don't think there was any huge scandals. I think it was just the normal sort of inefficiency, if you can call it that, and ongoing mismanagement. So Gwen Ramokgopa to me was always very mediocre, but that doesn't count for much in the ANC. So she's now part of the top 7. Then we had Nomvula Mokonyane. Now, I was leader of the opposition when she was premier, and at questions time, it always got a bit rough, actually, because I tried to hold her to account. I always used to scrutinize her declaration of assets every year. Every member of the legislature, myself included, every year we have to declare our assets, any income, any gifts that we receive. It makes for interesting reading sometimes. And Nomvula Mokonyane used to declare remarkably little. You would think she had a very modest lifestyle. And then we hear later in the Zondo Commission, it comes out that she had a 3 million rand Aston Martin parked in her garage. And she tried to explain it was something to do with the husband's business deal with Eskom, Eskom, of course. And she doesn't seem to think there was anything untoward of it. She said, no, she didn't get the full value of it. She was still paying some payments, but I think 2 million rand of it was sort of just gratis. And here she is, the Premier of the province, supposed to set an example, and she's got an Aston Martin sitting in her garage. And then we hear that BizNews is giving her, Christmas gifts and all sorts of goodies, and of course none of that is declared. Now, it's just the most basic thing to do, to declare everything every year like every other member of the legislature, but that was not enough for the Premier of Gauteng. And of course, no shame there at all. Of course, she went on to bigger scandals, to be honest, as head of the water department, where people dying because they don't get water, and massive scandal. And anyway, but shameless as usual, there she is in the top 7. And so that's the second one from Gauteng in the top 7. Of course, we have Paul Mashatile, who is one heartbeat away from becoming president. So 3 out of the 7, rose through the ranks in Gauteng ANC, which I hope I'm not repeating myself too much, but really shameless. Honestly, people who've been caught out in things like that should never be in public life, and the political parties should never allow them to be in public life.
Talking about lives lost, what happened to COVID funds?
Well, to me, that was like a stress test. Here was a public health emergency, and, people were dying, and we had lockdowns, and emergency funds were made available, a lot of emergency funds. In fact, the Gauteng Health Department got just under 2 billion rand. So you'd think, spend it properly, save lives. Whatever you do, don't waste money. And then the vultures were there. And it seemed to be, particularly the Gauteng Health Department, there's pre-existing networks. They're already there. And whilst all of us thought, what can we do with this money? How can we save lives? How can we siphon off as much of this money as possible for ourselves? So it turned out in the Gauteng Health Department that the PPE money was given off by, I think the story was they were given contracts by WhatsApp. I mean, the contracts were just handed out willy-nilly to all sorts of fishy companies. They didn't deliver. And as a result, we had a critical shortage of face masks and cleaning materials. And, the figure is about 200 million rand. And then the Public Service Commission, I remember, came out with a report about the chief financial officer of the Gauteng Health Department, who was sort of allegedly at the center of all this fishy contract management. And her appointment was under very strange circumstances. Apparently there was a falsified competency test, and she should never have been appointed in the first place. Anyway, eventually she got suspended, and there's still an ongoing investigation. 3 years later, we're still waiting for accountability for the COVID funds spent on PPE. But then the next chief financial officer was an acting financial officer, and that's the notorious one who refused to do investigation that was called for by Babita Deokaran, who got assassinated. So, of course, the whole Tembisa hospital thing is just gobsmacking if I think about it. I think we just again see the tip of the iceberg. At one hospital alone, Tembisa Hospital, 2 billion rand, according to the SIU, was just completely misspent. And that's a hospital notorious for patients sleeping on the floor at casualty. And just imagine if money in that department was properly spent. And we still yet to see people in jail because of that. And of course, we all want to know who assassinated Peter Deerkrans. So the horror of it to me actually was, so we had a chief financial officer was suspended in scandal. Then we get an acting chief financial officer. Turns out to be even worse from what I can see. So that was, but that's not all the misspending with the COVID money. Then we heard that there was a hospital supposedly donated by Anglo Ashanti in the far West Rand. Not the most populated part of the province. It was on their mind there. Shanty, and the hospital had, as I said, supposedly donated, but it wasn't turned out, but been made available for them. And the provincial government decides to spend 500 million rand plus renovating this hospital to provide 180 ICU beds in the middle of nowhere. Even Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital doesn't have ICU beds, that number of ICU beds. So, in the far West Rand, completely out of the way, you were going to spend 500 million rand on 180 ICU beds, supposedly for COVID patients. How are we going to staff them, equip them, and whatnot? And again, this is a very clear-cut example where people just saw, well, we can make money out of this. And the patients who are dying and the very real need. I just thought at the time that 5 million rand should be spent on existing hospitals. We could save a lot more lives. So there's 5 million rand completely wasted. And they now abandoned that hospital entirely. They spent 5 million rand on property that didn't belong to them. So again, an investigation that goes on forever. And then we had these alternative building structures, the alternative building methods that they were using according to Premier David Makura, they were going to do quick construction, and at the end of the day, it wasn't just be for the COVID crisis, but we'd have extra wards at hospitals like Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, Jubilee Hospital, the Kopanang Hospital in the Vaal, and it sounded good. It sounded like, instead of just having emergency field hospitals, as they called them, we'd have permanent structures that people could use later. But anyway, that was also a scam as well, quite frankly. You can go to Kopanang Hospital in the Vaal, in Vereniging, and you will see 200 million rand spent on uncompleted wards. They don't know what to do with them, not sure what to do with the wards at Chris Hani Baragwanath Hospital, and they're not sure what to do with the wards at Jubilee Hospital as well. So that was another several 100 million rand completely wasted as well. So one way or another, nearly 2 billion rand, very little to show for it. And this was money that should have gone to save lives. And really, I do hold Premier David Makura accountable. He always spoke very well, and, he's going to uncover corruption. The amount of corruption that occurred under him was just astounding. And he always claimed that he was going to clean it up. Let me take another example. This was a different department, the Department of Education Premier Panyaza Lesufi. Well, he's now our Premier, but Panyaza Lesufi headed the Gauteng Education Department. They spent more than 400 million rand deep cleaning, so-called deep cleaning of schools. You didn't need to deep clean them. There was no pupils there. There was no virus hiding there. More than 400 million rand deep cleaning schools, and nothing's come of it either. And now he's the Premier and washes his hand clean of the whole thing. So these are not small amounts of money. I've sort of tried to count over what percentage is actually wasted. I think it's, 20 to 30% is just mismanaged. It's not just that money is stolen. Nothing ever happens. We've got 2 hospitals that took 8 years to build at double the budget. Why can't we build a hospital in time and within budget? We have a department called the Infrastructure Development Department that just incapable of doing anything on time. And we've seen the scandal at Johannesburg Hospital. A gift of the givers had to come in and build a dispensary in record time within a smallish budget. It would simply not be able to be done by the Gauteng provincial government. They had to call in the National Health Department and the Development Bank. So I've come to the conclusion that corruption kills, actually. Not just literally with directly like Babita Deokaran, who was assassinated, but if you're misspending the money, especially COVID money and money for health, people die because of that. You can go to any of our hospitals and see massive unmet needs and infrastructure and buildings need to be fixed. And here it's stolen, mismanaged. Typically, you'd get a contractor in who wouldn't do the job, but who would still get paid. Then you'd have to get a new contractor. You could go through 3 contractors before you finally get the building, and then it'll turn out that the building has got faults that need to be patched up. So to me, it's just moral bankruptcy as well, because you're really not doing what you should for the people of Gauteng.
Lastly, Jack, you've spoken of massive corruption. You are probably unable to estimate exactly how much the province has lost. But what state has this left the province in?
Well, I sometimes think, what could we do if we spent the existing budget properly? Because we have massive unemployment. And I look at the Gauteng Health Department. I did an exercise. I wanted to find out what was the Gauteng Health budget. My memory was a bit hazy, so I did some research and found in the year 2000, the Gauteng Health budget was 6 billion rand. The Gauteng Health budget this year is 60 billion rand. It's 10 times larger. Yes, the population has close to doubled. There's a lot of needs, but medical inflation is a bit higher than normal inflation. But we have a budget now of 60 billion rand, 10 times larger than it was 20 years ago. So, what if we actually spent the money efficiently and effectively, not just in the Gauteng Health Department, but if you take any of the departments? I mean, there's scams all over the place. I'm thinking of the agencies. There's another trick is to have these agencies where you appoint all your buddies and they give out contracts and you can't do adequate oversight of them because they're an agency. I think of the Gauteng Growth and Development Agency, also scandals around that agency. We did an analysis. We found that half the budget was spent on top management. Now, this is an agency that is supposed to be growing the economy and providing jobs for our burgeoning population, and they're spending half their budget on top management, who didn't appear to be doing anything effective. Then you look at this so-called top management, and they're all friends of the ruling party. It's cadre deployment. So I think, we have elections coming up next year, and I think voters need to consider this very carefully. We've been ruled by the ANC since 1994. I think the scandals just got worse and worse. It's quite clear there's an utter lack of shame and utter lack of accountability. Now Premier Lesofie is, handing out jobs left, right and centre, also very suspicious. And are they sustainable, and are they real jobs, and all the questions that you're entitled to ask. It looks like electioneering, and it's a step up from handing out food parcels. But at the end of the day, with the massive budget that this provincial government has, scandal after scandal everywhere you look. As I said, I don't give the benefit of the doubt anymore. If it looks fishy, it is fishy. Probe deeper, and I'd like to see some justice and accountability finally. These cases need to come to court, and people need to be found guilty or not guilty on the evidence, and if they're guilty, they must go to jail. But I think we could do so much more if we had just honest people running our province.
Thank you. That was Mr. Jack Bloom, Veteran Democratic Alliance, Gauteng politician, giving BizNews the history of corruption in the Gauteng.